After a very successful year touring America for the first time in 1964, the Beatles planned another rigorous schedule for 1965 that would include recording sessions for a new album, Help, and a new film bearing the same name, and an international tour in the US and Europe. They would continue the tradition of releasing 2 LPs and 4 singles a year. On February 15th, Capitol released their new single, 8 Days a Week, in the US, which instantly went to number 1. Prior to the first recording sessions for the upcoming album, Help, John Lennon passed his driver's test and got his license. That same day, the Beatles started a week-long series of sessions at Abbey Road Studio 2. I'm going to cover all of the guitars, amps, and some of the other gear used by the Beatles on this album. Please note, after reviewing several books and other sources, there is some definitive proof in pictures and documentation, but there also are plenty of conflicting opinions on what was used when. Ultimately, this video is my speculation to the best of my knowledge. The first of 3 songs worked on that day was Ticket to Ride. Thanks to notes from George Martin's diary, we can see that the backing track featured George on his Rickenbacker 12-string and John on a new Fender. John was first seen with his guitar during rehearsals for the Christmas New Year show at the Hammersmith Odeon at the end of 1964. The story goes that Mal Evans was sent out to buy a pair of matching Strats for John and George and found 2 that were finished in sonic blue. These 1961 guitars are virtually identical, except George's features a very distinct bird's eye maple neck. These were the first Fenders owned by anyone in the band. George got his 1963 Rickenbacker 360-12 in 1964. Representatives from Rickenbacker brought a few guitars for the Beatles to check out while they were staying at the Savoy Hilton in New York. George was sick in bed, so he didn't come over to see them. But after John played the 12-string, he thought George would like it, so they brought it over to him to try out. The radio station WMCA happened to get George's number from his sister and called him while he was playing it. They asked if he would play it if they bought it for him, and of course he said absolutely. This would be the last album that George used this 360-12, as he would get a different one later on in the year. He's not pictured playing it at the sessions, but it is seen propped up against the wall. Thanks again to George Martin's notes, we know that Paul McCartney added an overdub on track 4, playing lead guitar on his Epiphone Casino. Paul was the first Beatle to get an Epiphone Casino. His is a 1962 model and is easy to differentiate between the 2 that George and John would later get in 1966, because his earlier model still had the shorter Gibson-style headstock, whereas the other 2 would have Epiphone's later hourglass-shaped headstock. He got it around Christmas of 1964 and was pictured playing it at rehearsals for the Christmas show, still strung right-handed. Another picture backstage at the Hammersmith shows Paul and George analyzing how they were going to adapt it for left-handed playing. In 1997, Paul was quoted as saying, "If I had to choose one electric guitar, it would be that guy." The second song that day, Another Girl, has George strumming rhythm guitar on his J160E and John with chinks on the offbeat with his Strat. The next day, Paul adds overdubs of lead guitar fills with his Casino. George and John both got their Gibson J160Es in 1962 at Rushworth in Liverpool, and they would eventually swap them on accident. Then John would lose his at the end of 1963, which technically was originally George's. By 1964, John got a new 1964 J160E. The way to differentiate the 62 jumbos, as the Beatles called them, from the 64s is the earlier models only had one ring around the sound hole. The newer model has two rings around the sound hole. So if you see John playing one with one ring after 1963, then it is George's. The third song of the first block of recording sessions, starting on February 15th, was the Harrison penned I Need You. It featured George playing rhythm on a nylon string Ramirez, Paul playing bass, John playing drums on the offbeat, and Ringo playing percussion on the back of a J160E. George then recorded a final overdub with his Rickenbacker 12-string using a Vox volume pedal for volume swells. The nylon string classical guitar is a Jose Ramirez Guitarra de Estudio that was given to George in 1964 by Klaus Voormann. George met Klaus in the early Hamburg days. Klaus bought the Ramirez when he was in Madrid, and when he returned to London, he played George some classical pieces that knocked him out. Since George had an interest in classical fingerstyle playing like Segovia and the superb country fingerpicking of Chet Atkins, he gave him the guitar. On the third day of recording, February 17th, the Beatles worked on The Night Before, which featured John playing a new instrument, a Hohner pianet. The Hohner pianet was a German-made electric keyboard that was added to the Beatles collection in 1965 and used for the first time on this album. The model the band used was a Pianet C. This new instrument was tried out on many songs on this and future albums and would be played by John and by Paul. This song also featured Paul on bass and a dual lead guitar solo played by Paul on his Casino and George on his Gretsch Tennessean. George acquired his Gretsch Tennessean during the round of Christmas and New Year's shows at the beginning of 1964. The guitar is most likely a 63 or possibly a 62, but since George's estate no longer owns the guitar and there's no documentation, it's hard to know for sure. George, having been a fan of Gretsch with first his Duo Jet and then a double cutaway Country Gentleman, this guitar was different in that it was a single cutaway, and instead of Filtertron humbucking pickups, it came equipped with single-coil high-low-tron pickups. This Gretsch also had fake painted-on F-holes, but did away with the string mutes of the Country Gentleman. Paul is not pictured playing his Hofner violin bass at the sessions, but it is seen on the floor next to him. As Paul didn't receive his new Rickenbacker bass until the North American tour after the Help sessions wrapped, then it is safe to say that the bass Paul plays on every song on the album is his Hofner 501 bass. This was the second model Hofner violin bass owned by Paul and was ordered by him new in 1963. It is very similar to his original 61 Hofner, but has two distinct differences. The staple pickups on the 63 bass were spaced apart from each other, with one in the neck and one in the bridge position, whereas the first model had the two pickups mounted close together near the neck. The other difference was the 63 had the more common horizontal script Hofner logo on the headstock, and the 61 had the vertical block type logo. The second song, recorded on February 17th, You Like Me Too Much, features Paul and George Martin on rollicking Steinway piano that was owned by Abbey Road, and John playing pianet. The next day, February 18th, they recorded You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, If You Got Trouble, and Tell Me What You See. the last song with Paul playing a solo on the pianette. The following day, February 19th, they focused on one track, You're Going to Lose That Girl, with Paul playing the Steinway grand piano. The song also featured John playing rhythm on George's Gretsch Tennessean, and then George playing a solo on the Sonic Blue Strat. On February 22nd, the Beatles put the album sessions on hold and flew to the Bahamas to start working on their yet-to-be-titled film that would become Help. After filming various location scenes around the islands, they mimed to Another Girl for a promo film that featured the four Beatles switching instruments throughout the song. John's Rickenbacker 325, George's J160E, Paul's 63 Hofner bass, and Ringo on his 1964 Ludwig Super Classic Kid in Oyster Black Pearl finish. Then they headed to the Austrian Alps for more filming. For the promo film for Ticket to Ride, they dragged a grand piano out into the snow. A month later, on March 22nd, they returned to Britain and continued to work on the film at Twickenham Film Studios. On March 28th, they somehow found the time to shoot TV promos for Thank Your Lucky Stars, which aired on April 3rd, of them miming to 8 Days a Week, Yes It Is, and Ticket to Ride. These promos strategically coincided with the release of their new single, Ticket to Ride, backed with Yes It Is, which was released on April 9th in the UK and April 19th in the US. On April 11th, the Beatles performed at Empire Pool Wembley for the NME 64-65 annual Poll Winners All-Star Concert.
Next song we'd like to sing, you in tune? Next song we'd like to sing is our latest record. If any of you have heard it. And it's called Ticket to Ride. I think I'm gonna be sad. I think it's today, yeah. The girl that's driving me mad is going away. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care. She said that living with me was bringing her down, yeah. She would never be free when I was around. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care. I don't know why she's riding so high. Sure think twice, sure do right by me before she gets to saying goodbye. Sure think twice, sure do right by me. I think I'm gonna be sad. I think it's today, yeah. The girl that's driving me mad is going away. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care. I don't know why she's riding so high. Sure think twice, sure to do right by me before she gets to saying goodbye. Sure think twice, sure to do right by me. with me was bringing her down, yeah. She would never be free when I was around, yeah. Ah, she's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care. My baby don't care. My baby don't care. My baby don't care. My baby don't care.
Now that their new film had a title, the Beatles returned to the studio on April 13th to work on the title track, which featured George on his Gretsch Tennessean, Paul on Hofner bass, and John on a new Framus Hootenanny 12-string. The Framus Hootenanny 524 was another new German-made instrument that appeared for the first time during these sessions. This 12-string would be played by George and John and featured a mahogany back, sides, and neck with a rosewood fingerboard and was finished in natural blonde at an additional charge. After some more filming, on May 10th the band recorded Dizzy Miss Lizzie, which featured John playing rhythm guitar on his Rickenbacker 325 and George playing lead on his Gretsch Country Gentleman. Once again, there are no pictures from the sessions of John playing this guitar, but it is seen on the floor. This 1964 Rickenbacker 325 was John's second 325 Capri. It was made for him in '64 to replace his road-worn 1958 model. It was a favorite of his in 1964 and '65, but it sustained a neck crack at the Christmas shows in '64. After 1965, John would not use it on records again. George's 1963 Gretsch Country Gentleman was his second model that he got to replace his 1962 Country Gentleman that he bought earlier that same year. The main differences between the two models are different methods for the string mute system. His earlier '62 model featured screw-down control knob mutes that ended up getting in his way while trying to play. To avoid damaging the wiring, Harrison was supplied with the '63 model that featured flip-up mutes instead, and the first model became his spare. After completing their single Help, the Beatles started working on the flip side, I'm Down. This song would feature Harrison playing a guitar solo on his Gretsch Tennessean, followed by a Lennon solo on another new instrument for the group, a Vox Continental organ. The Vox Continental organ was a portable 4-octave keyboard with built-in vibrato. It featured reverse black and white keys, so the main keys were black and the flats and sharps were white. It would be played by John and Paul live on the upcoming tour, and also used by both on the upcoming Rubber Soul album. After a short dinner break, Paul recorded the backing track of Yesterday on his Epiphone Texan in only 2 takes. George Martin then worked on a string arrangement with McCartney's input that would be tracked 2 days later. The string section featured 2 violin, a viola, and a cello, which was to be tracked by session musicians. Paul's 1964 Epiphone Texan FT-79N was acquired by him in the summer of 1964. This acoustic flat top is right-handed, so he flipped it over and restrung it for lefty. It was made in the Gibson Kalamazoo plant and is similar to a J45, having sloped shoulders. It was made with mahogany back and sides and a natural solid spruce top and an unbound rosewood fingerboard. Pictures from the Help sessions show the band using their 100-watt 1964 JMI Vox AC100 Mark I heads and cabinets. Also present at the sessions were their 1963 Vox AC30 twins with top boost. Although they primarily used the AC30 for keyboard amplification with the Hohner Pianet and Vox Continental, I'm assuming the AC30 also saw some use with their guitars as well, since the high wattage of the AC100s was not always considered ideal in a recording environment. After wrapping up sessions on the album, the band embarked on a brief 14-day tour of mainland Europe from June 20th to July 3rd. Equipment remained unchanged, with John playing his Rickenbacker 325 and using the Gibson J160E as a spare. George favored his Tennessean and alternated with the Rick 12-string. He also had his 65 Gretsch Country Gentleman as a spare. Paul used his 63 Hofner bass with his 61 Hofner there as a spare. Amplification was the same, Vox AC100s, and photos show the closed-back cab of Paul's bass rig compared to the open-back cabinets of George and John's AC100s. Help, backed with I'm Down, was released in the US on July 19th and the UK on July 23rd, becoming an instant #1 on both sides of the Atlantic. Help, the album, was released in the UK on August 6th and in the US on the 13th. After a television appearance in Blackpool, the Beatles would have 2 weeks off before departing on their second U.S. tour. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for part 2, the U.S. tour and Rubber Soul.